Yeah, my
It's
sister
gonna cost
has
a
a
couple
friend who's
$1 million,
RDSE.
take 18
Yeah.
months.
Yes, and
Any numbers we pulled out, so your number just.
One, they used to both live in Nashville.
Okay, good evening. We're going to start the meeting. It's at 6:03 in the evening. Never had this, I'm sorry. So we're going to call the meeting to order. And I will take roll call. Ellie Fleming.
Here.
Yes, that's the right answer.
Art Anderson.
Here.
Nancy Glisman. Here. Michelle Timios.
Yes, here.
Perry Moy.
Here.
Randy
Here.
Zaleski. Charlie.
I'm here.
The infamous Charlie. Okay, and we are waiting hopefully for Taylor Johnson, who has not yet arrived. Vern Sisson is just walking in the door, so we have a quorum. And we are going to continue. So what I want to do first is before we start anything else, is reintroduce you to the people who have put together our final draft that everybody has had a chance to read, whether you've read it or not. Amy, apparently, I'm going to say that she was the lead writer on this because you can see how consistent everything else. Sanjan has always been with us and knows what's going on as the connectivity. And this is, John Hausiel, the head of Hausiel and Levine, who is here to help guide us through this evening. I have to tell you, I'm very excited, and I'll tell you about that when I get to the chairman's report. So we have approval of the draft minutes from December.
So moved.
Harry and Randy. Oops. Okay. It's been a long time since our last meeting, and a lot of things have been going on. I am excited. I am now thrilled. I think from everything that I have heard so far, I'm very happy with what we have gotten. We've only needed to go through the first 4 chapters, but they gave us the first 8. There are still a few things that we have to put together and make sure to make it more cohesive. Add a glossary, Renee can tell you what we still need because she's our primo lady. She knows the whole thing. She knows how it's supposed to go. I just run the
Is that on your
meetings.
business card?
Primo.
That's a good business card.
Sure, she's our primo person. And Adam has been our support person for so long. He's just, besides Pop.
Do it all.
He does it all. Everybody has been very supportive. I appreciate everything that you guys have done so far on this and putting it together and working through all the things that we've had to work through. This is the really cohesive piece that I've read, even if it's not completely finished, but we're going to go through that tonight and let them do what they need to do, and then I'm going to be very quiet. Excuse me, I can't say that I'm going to be very quiet. Taylor Johnson is here. Wonderful. She's the last of the people that we were expecting. Pat Grant cannot be here tonight because she's had some COVID issues in her place. And again, Scott will not be here, but he will be getting in touch with us if we need him. Okay, so any public comment? Although we very rarely have public. Okay. Old business. We don't have any old business. So, introducing our new business, presentation of the draft comprehensive plan chapters from HLA staff. Thank you.
All right, so we're going to walk through word by word, line by line, all 200 pages with you guys this evening.
There you go.
We're not. So. Again, we're really happy, like Mary said, to be at this point in the process. What we want to go through this evening is provide an overview of all the chapters that we've submitted. There are a couple that has not been submitted yet. We'll go through what those are and that they're coming. We've already got them drafted. You just haven't seen them yet. We'll go through each chapter. We'll provide the highlights of what's in it. We'll give you some visual examples from the chapter of what it looks like. You've all had it. I don't want you to think you have to get all your comments in this evening. We know it's a voluminous document to look at and absorb. Think of this evening's meeting more of a walkthrough and an orientation to what the document is in its working state so far. Ask any questions, let us know any comments that you have so far if you've gotten a chance to go through some and or all of it. We'll record it the best we can this evening. If you have anything written down, feel free to give us your comments, corrections, whatever. We'll collect them, give them to Adam, he'll give them to us. But we want to have this chance to sort of walk through it with you as an overview to help orient you so that on your own or as a group, when you go through it maybe in more detail, you have a better sense of how it has come together. So we've got a presentation to sort of walk through it. Take notes because there's going to be a quiz at the end. Just kidding, it's not going to be one of those either. So real quickly, see if we can get this thing to actually work. So far, that's a no.
Can you make it work?
Let's try this. There we go.
There you go.
So Halcyon Levine is here this evening. So again, let Mary introduce us. I'm John Halcyon, principal and founder of Halcyon Levine. Sue John is with us. He is now the acting project manager. He's been working with our previous project manager from the beginning. So he provides sort of a staffing continuity throughout the entire project. So that was really good. I worked extensively on the previous McHenry County Comprehensive Plan. For many of you did. Maybe that's why you look familiar. Years ago, that one won the state's award for best comprehensive plan in the state of Illinois. We'll see if we can't duplicate that effort here. Also with us is Allie. Allie is over there sitting next to Sue John. And as Mary indicated, one of the key things, and this was a challenge last time when we did the county plan as well for different reasons. Last time the approach was the county formed like 8 committees of volunteers. And for a year, year and a half, whatever, the committees all worked on their piece to draft their chapter. Economic development, environmental sustainability, transportation, whatever. And then when it came time to producing their chapters, one committee might produce a page of bullets, and that was their chapter, and another committee would produce 87 pages of text with no maps. And it was a real mismatch of good content, right? But a plan has to have sort of a singular voice, right? A uniform authorship style, so you can get through it. So this time we had several different consultants working with us. So Geocentric did a lot of the environmental, KLOA did a lot of the transportation, McGuire Gillespie did a lot of the historic preservation, Solutions in the Land did a lot of the environmental and water. All professional, all very thorough content, but all with a different voice, all with a different style. As all of that material came into our office, we had to work together as a team, whether it be Miles or Oscar or myself or Sue John, to try to work it together. But ultimately, it was Allie that took the first shot at being the conduit for all the content from different sources and giving it a unified voice and thematic approach and narrative style, which produced a cohesive planning document. So I think that was one of the biggest achievements over what you've seen previously to this version. So.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, and that was really important to us, right? A document, few people read it cover to cover. It's not a novel, and maybe Mary will read it cover to cover, but most people don't. Most people use it sort of as a reference document. And that also informed the style with which it was written. If people are concerned mostly about water, they'll turn to the section about water. If people are most concerned about transportation, they might look at the section on transportation. And we wanted to write it in a style that would require or mandate cross-referencing to some other section of the document. It had to stand alone. And not only the chapter had to stand alone, but an individual recommendation or objective needed to stand alone. So within each one, it's not as simple as a bullet or a succinct sentence. It had to have the rationale, the McHenry County context, the best practice, and the recommendation all sort of packed into a paragraph or two. So it's a very self-contained approach that allows for a self-guided journey through the document. For a layman, for an expert, it doesn't matter. And that was our objective. Yeah.
And I'm going to interrupt you because in all of our discussions and everything that we said, I said, remember, the people who are going to be reading this have no clue what we're talking about.
Yeah.
What is agrivoltaics?
Yeah.
What is this? What is that? So that we could give them something that would cross-reference. And those are the kind of things that when I reviewed it, I gave to Ellie so that she could get that all in a glossary. So if you need to look at it, you can asterisk it, you can do it. But this has come out with, this is what's going on. This is where we are today. These are the things that we can do. And that really is our purpose in all of this. Because after this, whatever the county board decides we're going to do, and I think it's nice that they'll be able to read through it too and see how it connects and why we're getting to it. I hope to God. And we'll see where it goes from there. But then they can start writing ordinances that support the things that we're talking about, because it's not just now, it's not just 10 years from now, we're talking 2050. And there are gonna be things in there that we don't like, and we don't even know whether or not they're still going to be viable in 30 years because of how fast everything is working. So everything that you have done is exactly what I've asked for. Thank you very much.
The other thing, Mary, was that there's a lot of new members of city government.
Yes.
And they're very, very, and not to use the term cynically, or young. And when I talk to them about a planning, it goes over their head. They don't realize that you have to look down that road to plan for whatever we're trying to do. And that they're interested.
Yeah, and that's a good way to put it. Is everybody in this room is very literate as to the necessity of planning, right? A lot of people are not. And if you go through the course of your municipal tenure or political tenure, whether you're staff, elected, or an appointed official, and everything you do is sort of ad hoc or in reaction to something, then you're not proactively setting the agenda to move forward. And, you know, we're not Dubai. We don't get to sort of like have an emirate approve a project and we start building islands,
Exactly right.
Here, improvements are much more incremental, right? And you can be very busy over 20 years. And if you're not working in coordination with a plan, 20 years from now, you'll look back and say, man, we've been so busy, we're doing so much, and we're where we were 20 years ago. What you want to be able to say in 20 years is we've been working like crazy for the last 20 years. We've stuck to our plan, and man, look what we've accomplished. We've really moved the needle, and that's the value of a plan. So again, what we're going to do tonight is just recap the process. We'll review the public draft review just pretty quickly to sort of orient you to it. It's a lot. And then I'll go over what the next steps are going forward. So this was the planning process, 7 different steps. In a nutshell, planning, and you've heard this before, is really only 3 things. It doesn't matter whether you're planning 20 years for a county or planning your daughter's wedding for next October. It doesn't matter. It's where are you right now, where do you want to be, and what do you have to do to get there. That in a nutshell is what it is. Those 3 things are very simple. So because we're consultants, we make it 7 things, just to confuse you a little bit. But these are the different 7 steps. So it's about initiation, public engagement, which has been throughout, and we'll have more of it coming up. Existing conditions, visioning in the framework, future growth, preliminary wide plans for the entire city or the county, and then the adoption process. And so this is what it is. And right now we're on the last couple of steps. Those county-wide plans, we're going to get this right, get the draft right, and then get it ready to bring back out to the public and through the public hearing process for adoption. So we're, 4th quarter, a couple minutes left on the clock. We're in good shape. We'll score and win the game. So we're pretty close. So this draft is, right now we're working through it with this committee. It's 11 different chapters is what the plan structure will be. Introduction, community profile, those are 2 you have not seen yet. They are fully drafted. We have them, like they're printed out over there. We're going to be tweaking that a little bit with staff and refining it, and you'll be getting that soon. And then it'll be a complete package, right? So those are the 2 we don't have yet, but that's introduction, and community profile think of it as sort of like a McHenry County snapshot. And the existing conditions work we did before you reviewed, that's primarily the content for that second chapter. So agricultural resources, land use and development, housing, economic development, transportation, water resources, green infrastructure, energy infrastructure, and historic preservation are the chapters that we've delivered. So are the ones that you've got before you. We do want to make a recommendation for one thing to change the structure of this. We know that agricultural resources are a priority. And for that reason, initially they were sort of put in as chapter 3 right after the introduction and profile. But our recommendation is that agricultural resources go behind land use and development. And the reason why is this, is agricultural resources or agriculture is a defined land use. And by having the land use and development chapter first, it sets the table for a more contextual conversation about agriculture. So we will still reemphasize and emphasize the priority of agricultural resources, but we think chapter 4 needs to be chapter 3 and vice versa. Okay, so that's one suggestion we think you make, and we'll make sure that the wording fits that reorientation and that agricultural resources still is promoted as one of the most important things. But land use sets the table better for that discussion if it comes first. So, introduction is pretty straightforward. This is the splash page in the document, right? And people need to orient into the document. So what this really covers is what is a comprehensive plan. It establishes sort of the state statutes, the legal authority, what it's supposed to be. We describe the process that was undertaken by the county to create the comprehensive plan, the different themes that exist in the plan and how it's supposed to be used. The themes are equality, health, and sustainability. We also provide regional context. We talk about where McHenry County is in the larger region, because that's very important when it comes into so many different chapters of the plan, is the regional role and gravity that McHenry County has with everything that is around it. So that is also approached in the introduction. So the introduction is simply that. What is a comprehensive plan? How do you use it? How do we develop it? And where is the county's home in the region? So that's what the introduction is. Did anybody review, you guys haven't seen the introduction yet, so never mind. Community profile, the key takeaways in this one is we did all the outreach, and all the outreach events and summaries are in here. Online community priorities and outreach is all identified. We also go through existing conditions, right? So if 5-10 years from now, someone looks at the comprehensive plan and they say like, boy, why was this a recommendation? What was going on at the time when this was created? They ought to be able to turn to this chapter and see a snapshot of what was going on at the time the plan was created. This was the population, this was the demographic, these are the market conditions, this is the land use, this was the zoning. They should know what was going on. Because a lot changes, and sometimes a lot changes quickly. And people need to know when they're reading something in the future, what was going on at the time the plan was created. So that's this. So we go over demographics. This is sort of what the chapters look like. And again, those are the first 2 chapters you haven't seen yet, but it's introduction and orientation to the plan and that snapshot in time of McHenry County. The next chapter is agricultural resources. Again, we're suggesting this gets flipped to 4, but we know this is a crucial component. So key takeaways: preserving agricultural uses and provide oversight for any conversion to farming development, promote soil health, erosion, abatement, and water conservation, address and combat the impacts of climate change on agricultural uses, and identify and deploy additional strategies for agricultural preservation in the region. This is just sort of some of the 4 main themes. Now, each one of these things has a ton of recommendations, different objectives, various goals, best practices, call out texts of case studies, but these are the key takeaways for this chapter. Again, this is generally what the chapter looks like. We just give you sort of a splash page. This is reminiscent of all the different chapters. What you see over here is a best practice. This talks about carbon farming. Throughout the document, sometimes when you're reading goals and objectives, to get a real handle on what's going on, you want to read a best practice or how some of these things actually exist somewhere else. So we call out these different boxes of case studies and best practices throughout the document. And I guess before we go on to land use, did anybody at this point, and again, this is not like your only shot to provide comments, but did anybody have thoughts or comments or corrections or anything about the agricultural chapter, if you happen to have read it yet? Yeah,
The component on carbon farming, I think that there should be an appendix or a glossary that they can refer to. Carbon farming is so new and so foreign to people, and we want to keep this so that McHenry County people can understand it. We all know what a farm is, we all know what they're producing food, but a concept of carbon farming is so different to them, and how it actually benefits the future. If there was a little segment or a glossary they could refer to.
yeah, excellent point and consistent with the direction Mary gave us a while ago. And she talked about it in her opening remarks, but maybe not everybody picked up on it. We want to speak in as plain English as we possibly can.
Correct.
We don't want to make this plan reads, we don't want to make it academic. No offense to any attorneys in the room, if there are anybody, you shouldn't need an attorney to interpret anything in this document. It should be very clear, user-friendly, and understandable. That said, there are some terminologies that people are not going to be familiar with, and we can't use other terminology. It is what it is. So carbon farming is an excellent example. As you go through here, we've tried to be diligent about identifying terms that people might not know. And we're starting a list of terms to put into a glossary of terms in the back, right?
Yes.
So, and we've already started keeping track of ones that we think might be relevant. As you go through this, if you think there are terms that would benefit by being in the glossary, let Adam know.
Okay.
And he will let us know, and we will start compiling a master list of terms to be in a glossary of terms. That's an excellent example of a good one, yeah. Perfect. There was another hand up for, yep.
Yes, it's one I mentioned in the beginning, and I'm gonna die on this hill, and it's okay if it doesn't get in. But I noticed still that we have the phrase deep-rooted perennial plants. It really nitpicky, and I just really want to encourage we say native Illinois deep-rooted perennial
That's
plants,
fine.
or because like that's the push we should be doing, not just perennial, it should be Illinois specific.
Yeah.
So it's, I know it's
That's fine.
nitpicky, but
But
I
that's exactly
I'll
where
die on
it
that
should
hill.
Right. And- and-
where it should be.
I'm hoping that is not so controversial a hill that you don't have to die.
I don't think it should.
I'm hoping we can accommodate that with a suggestion and not a fatality.
Okay, good.
I
Then
think we can
I'll
swing
be
that
at
one,
peace.
yeah.
I'll be fine
So
with
I think
that.
that's good, so. And so John and Ally are taking notes while we're going through this, but that's good. And again, as you go through this, just get your comments, nitpicking or otherwise. The key thing here is, we know we're gonna have to dial this in. We know we're gonna have to make some calibrations just to get it exactly right. And that's to be expected. At some point in any process, somebody has to sort of be the first person through the door and say, I've listened to everybody, I think I got a good handle on this, we're putting pen to paper. And then you put it down in front of them and say, now from now on, we're reacting to this. The good, the bad, the ugly, we'll make whatever changes we have to, but this is now the landing pad for commentary, right? And that's where we are with this. So don't think you have to get it all out this evening. When you're reviewing on your own, just keep notes, keep track, and let us know, and we'll make all those changes. So both of those are, I think we can accommodate that, and I think we can accommodate that, so.
Good.
We're batting 1,000. So land use and development is the next chapter, and in a nutshell, land use is really the core component of, fundamentally, of a comprehensive plan, right? For a century, a comprehensive plan was basically a land use map for forever, right? And it was basically 5 colors, right? It was yellow for residential, green for open space, red for commercial, and purple for industrial, and there's your oversimplified land use map. And that was pretty much what comprehensive planning was. And coincidentally, it almost perfectly aligned with zoning ordinances. But now comprehensive plans are truly comprehensive. Cultural, historic, water, resources, resiliency, hazard mitigation, wildlife, environmental ecosystems, green infrastructure. I mean, it's, depending on who you're working with and what the community is, it can be a lot of different things. And so comprehensive planning is very different, but still today, legally, the way it is given its mandate through state enabling legislation, it is fundamentally so they can plan for the use of and development of land and growth over time and the related transportation and facility needs of that growth. In a nutshell, that's still at its core. So That's why land use and development is literally the core or setting of the table for everything else. So, yeah, just jump in if you want.
Oh, no, they don't get to do that. You don't want to do that. You really don't want to do that. No, and I will interrupt you only occasionally.
Anytime you want.
As long as we've already gotten down to switching 3 and 4, is there anybody who's against doing that? If we're talking about going from the beginning to the middle, to the end, to the bottom, let's do that and give you your authority now. I'll make anybody for a motion?
So moved.
Second.
And Randy seconds, Charlie and Randy? Okay, then we will switch 3 and 4 to make life
Are we
easier
gonna have a
for you.
vote?
And is there anybody against it? I'm not hearing anyone. Does that make it unanimous? Yes, it does. Thank you. Go ahead.
Perfect. Okay, so land use, again, we're looking at, we document existing land use, municipal growth areas, and then land use plan, future land use planning going forward. So you can see here a couple of different things. This is sort of 2000 to 2021 growth. We also take a look by the numbers in terms of population over that same time. And we also this is CMAP information here about household growth forecast from 2020 to 2050. So this is basically 2000 to 2021. This is 2020 to 2050 forecast. We want to give people a sense of what's happened over the last 20 years and what's going to be happening over the next couple of decades. This is the land use plan here. You can see it. So some of the key takeaways: balanced growth and development with preservation. And it's interesting because in Connecticut, they call their comprehensive plans, they don't call them comprehensive plans, they call them POCDs. And they call them plans of conservation and development. And so in the very name, they say, listen, you got to tackle both. You got to talk about conservation and you got to talk about development, and we need a plan for both. They just title it that, which is kind of it keeps it on the front burner that we got to do both of these things. It's the only state that calls it that, but I think it's kind of interesting. So coordinate with county municipalities and townships. County planning is unique in that you have sort of autonomous planning jurisdictions within your jurisdiction, and as they grow, they begin to enter into areas that historically were county that may very well end up being municipal, and those edges are crucial and coordination is crucial. Guide annexation into municipalities where appropriate and encourage sustainable land use and development best practices. These are some of the key things in this chapter. We then get into, there were a few different scenarios that were done to sort of take a look at what growth could look like. The first one was we call a CAP scenario, and the CAP scenario is taking a look at your current adopted plans. So let's say no new plans get changed, and the county will go forward with the plans that are currently adopted, right? So it's your current policy guide, right? So given that, more than 37,000 acres of new estate residential, projected 52,000 to 150,000 new dwelling units, and about a 20.4% decrease in agricultural land. So if we don't change anything, those are some of your key numbers, right? So a lot more people, a lot less open space, and a lot less agriculture. Scenario 2, we accommodates about 61,000 new households, totaling approximately 18,000 fewer acres of residential development. Scenario 1. So scenario 1 had more residential growth than this, and a lot of that was sort of that estate or larger lot residential, right? Which you see a lot of in the county. Due to industrial use and compatibility with conservation overlays, this scenario saw a substantial decrease in industrial uses because conservation begins to take more precedent over new growing development. There's a mindset toward preserving the natural aspects of the county. And then infill development is not supported in municipalities' extraterritorial jurisdictions, including Cary, Crystal Lake, McHenry, and Prairie Grove, due to SARA overlays. So this sort of shows where that is. So a little bit better than the CAP analysis, but still not everything you might want it to be. And scenario 3 accommodates just over 8,000 acres of new residential, so way down from the previous ones. And it does that in part by not picking up the same number of projected growth and accommodating 90% of it through large lot residential, but providing, working with the municipalities, more of a mixed residential approach, which is the trend across every state in the country in different ways. Anticipated development capacity aligns with additional unincorporated households, and agriculture and open space would be reduced by slightly more than 2% compared to the existing land use. So a pretty minimal hit on agricultural land use areas. So this one is a little bit better than the first two. So by looking at the final scenario, which is preferred land use, is a revised version of scenario 3, intensifies development in strategic locations, balancing better, still meeting the demands of projected population, commerce, jobs, employment, growth, but it prioritizes more preservation of agricultural land and the premature conversion of agricultural land, and the conservation of environmental features and open space. So by putting a little bit more priority to those, recalibrating how we address the other needs, it's a much more balanced approach. So this scenario 3 is what is reflected in the land use plan. So this is the chapter layout. We define graphically and narratively what all the different land uses are, so you don't have to wonder what they are. But it's pretty clear in reading this chapter, the level of analysis that we went through. There's a difference between visioning and hallucinating, right? And visioning has to be grounded in some sort of market or projected realities, right? You can't, if an area is projected to grow substantially, you can't just say, no, we're not. You have to try to manage the growth and preserve who you are, right? And that's a challenge for places that are environmentally rich. So when you read through this chapter, it very clearly states what the priorities are: agricultural preservation, the conservation approach to open space and environmental features and ecology, the responsible component of working with municipalities within the county to accommodate new approaches to development, to accommodate growth, commerce, employment, households, and economy, while balancing the other two things. And how we derived at the recommendation. It's important for, and I think especially for elected officials, so I would think that the county commission would like this. You don't want planning to be anecdotal. And I think for 100 years or more, the profession has been largely anecdotal. And not enough things are data-driven, analytically assessed geographically. So you say, like, here's the projected growth, here's the economic numbers we have to hit to be viable, here's what we have to do in terms of household absorption to be responsible going forward. These are our priorities. Let's do some data analytics through geography and GIS analysis to determine through science what's the best approach going forward, balanced with what the county's priorities are. And can we do both? It shouldn't be either or, right? You should be able to preserve ag land, be conservation oriented, accommodate growth responsibly, and have a strong and thriving economy. It's not one or the other. And in the past, it's always been one or the other. Yeah.
And to dovetail on your statement, every time you use land use, like before scenario 1 and at the ending, we should call it land use and conservation and cross out the word development, because that brings into focus of what this committee is trying to do.
Right.
And it also is a feel-good for the McHenryite to see that. Because when you say development, they think sprawl, they think another subdivision, another strip mall. And if we go land use and conservation, that opens it up for what you just said.
Okay.
And you stated it well, too.
Yeah. We can do that. I mean, go ahead.
Let's have a conversation
Yeah.
about that for about 5 minutes if we could. My concern is that if you start talking about just conservation, you get rid of all the people who are talking about development. So if anything, it could be slash or conservation development, but I think having developed land use and conservation development might be a more appropriate look. I don't know. I'll take it.
C4, encourage sustainable land use and conservation best practices. Because development and land use are the same thing almost, to me.
But that's to you, and that's who else are we talking to that don't understand that? That's my question.
Yeah, I agree. I would say what Mary said earlier, that there's very few people that are gonna read this entire thing. One particular audience that goes to these kind of plans often are people that are looking to invest in our communities. And we wanna make sure that they see a path that they can invest.
The path is defined as we go on. At least that's what I see.
Yeah, I think I agree with Mary. I think that if we don't have development in there somewhere, a lot of people will just not go into enough detail, just assume that the county is not friendly to new business. And the only, McHenry County, of all the collar counties, is dependent on residential real estate taxes far more than any of the other collar counties. Only 10% of our EAV comes from businesses of any kind, and the only realistic way to get our taxes to a more manageable level is to attract more employers to the county. And that is a very difficult challenge.
Ellie?
I agree with both in some ways. I don't agree with changing the title. I think it should still be land use and development. But I mean, I did just do a quick count, and it says development 4 times. We don't have the word conservation in any of the key takeaways. So maybe we put conservation into one of them, like balanced growth and development. Well, I mean, that one says preservation, but encourage sustainable land use and based in conservation best practices, or something like that. Like maybe throwing in that word somewhere would at least put a little bit more balance than that.
I like
Well,
that
I think
idea.
that's
We should
fine.
just have another point.
Yeah.
Have 5 instead of 4.
Yeah.
And we could even make it real clear to say one of the driving considerations in land use is the value of conservation, or is the prioritization of conservation, blah, 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 in determining where land use and development is appropriate. That this is a driving determination or something. So we can make it so it's like, almost the fact that it's not in the title, but sort of the first thing's bolted underneath, it almost has more gravity, like, oh my God, before they even start talking about this, they're just saying, hey, just so you know, this is a driving consideration, so.
Development done well is the friend of conservation, not the enemy.
Right. Right, you're exactly right. So we can, I'm just looking at it.
And there are a number of things going on in the county arts development now that aren't gonna just stop. So yeah, I think
For
we
sure.
need to put it in there.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, and when you get into the chapter, there are a lot of different things about ag preservation and conservation and ensuring contiguous development as opposed to infrastructure extension and leapfrogging development, green infrastructure resources. There's a lot in here about the conservation component. So we can beef that up right up front of the chapter. Protecting, enhancing, and maintaining natural resources.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. All right.
That works.
All right, so we'll beef that up so it's even more clear. But our main thing here is we wanted people to understand how we got to the preferred plan, what analysis and thought process went into it. We wanted to create the land use map and then very clearly define the different land uses, so it wasn't just a color on a map, but they knew what they could picture what it was, right? The next one is housing, and housing is it's probably the most rapidly increasing issue communities are facing across the United States, in every state, from rural counties to major metropolitan areas. So expand housing choice, allowing for greater diversity in unit size and acreage to better fit different needs of residents. Single family detached, if that's all you provide, I still think that's an essential component that most places need to provide as an option. It's viable, it fits well, it's a good part of the mix. But more and more people now are seeking options to that, whether it's ADUs, single-family attached, multifamily, mixed use, a variety of different product types. Encourage growth in strategic locations. That's a key thing. You don't want growth to go everywhere. You want to be very strategic about where it goes. And then incentivizing and using the planning practice such as the 15-minute neighborhoods to promote interconnectivity. So where do you put residential development? Is it next to parks? Is it next to amenities? Is it next to transportation routes? Is it next to commercial? Things like that. So again, this is the chapter layout that you can see here. And we talk about this notion of a 15-minute city and what that means. The idea is that no matter where you live, are you within 15 minutes of the goods and services and things that you need on a daily basis, right?
So how do we sell that as a land use for unincorporated McHenry County? Because a 15-minute neighborhood to me says you're gonna look at it closer to what is now a municipality, but isn't in the municipality yet, and see if we can start coordinating with those communities to make sure that we get within 15 minutes, because I think that's going to be something that we have to explain for unincorporated areas. And I don't know how to do that.
Well, and realistically, I don't want this to be a document that's perceived as being academic or theoretical. If it's not practical,
Okay.
what's the point? So the notion is it creates these more livable environments for people.
Right.
And we live now in an age where people are more aware of, maybe I don't have a car, so how am I going to get something if I don't have access to a car, if there's not transit available? Like, how do I get to these things? So when you're looking at new residential development, if you're locating it within proximity to commercial and services or major corridors, whatever, it's going to prevent development from going out in the middle of nowhere. It's going to prevent development from going out in the middle of a cornfield or agricultural field. It's going to prevent the premature conversion of more valued habitat. Because if we're going to follow this idea that residential development is going to be by nature closer to where development currently is, so you can get to it more easily. That's that 15-minute idea. So if you look at the context of the way things are right now, and new development is considered to be within 15-minute of those things, that notion would prevent development from prematurely shooting out into the county.
Okay.
And would keep it more concentrated, so.
And for our purposes, we would be saying, go ahead, help me here, that, well, it explains one of the reasons that we're going with fewer residential development in unincorporated areas is because they're not 15 minutes from anything.
Right.
There you go. Okay.
Yeah, and that's it, right, and that's it.
Remember, we've got open houses, meetings coming up, so when they aren't available, we need to be available to answer those questions. Yes,
It creates consistency with the.
yes.
Right.
So
Barry?
in the county, unincorporated, a rural 15-minute village has to have broadband to get goods and services to them. They have to work from their home, so they can work from their home. A guy my age and a person your age, okay? And from that then, that's a 15-minute virtual village. And we should mention that in our 15-minute village. And we can, in the county, we need a virtual village. And that's the future that I see in 2050. You can get transportation from point A to point B. You call a ride share, okay? You can go to work in your home. You can get goods and services delivered to you. Amazon does that all day long. God, I wish I would have created Amazon, you know? But that's what we have to promote as a comprehensive plan, that we embrace technology, we embrace a virtual world.
Michelle?
And then Mary, to your point about how do we message this, 15-minute city thing, because it is specific about walking, right? Like, okay, is this something where we're trying to set the, tone for the entire county? Like, how we do want to see this document as something that, like, we want cities and villages and our other communities to try to follow too. Is this one of those instances?
Yeah, well, I think it marries a couple of things. If we talk about the idea of sort of adjacency requirements for new growth, right? So you want to be adjacent to existing utilities. You want to leapfrog out and have a developer extend utilities 3.5 miles out because they happen to buy a farm to develop. And it also begins to allow you to have different residential densities and different residential products near existing municipalities that you have sprinkled throughout the county, because there are several of them. So if the county supports this notion, what it's going to do is when residential developments are proposed, for the most part, it's going to be consistent with this idea, it's going to want to keep them near where those services and goods and amenities already are, which is the municipalities. And it'll prevent again, like I said, it'll prevent these residential developments from prematurely locating and satelliting out into the county where you don't want it yet. Right? You're gonna have residents or farmsteads or other things out there in agriculture for sure. But again, you don't wanna see the premature conversion of, in the middle of where there's nothing, a developer who just happens to buy a farm say, we're gonna now plop in X number of residential in the middle of the county.
Unless they put in a school, an ATM,
Grocery store,
Yeah.
post office.
The goods and
7-Eleven,
services you would need.
gas
right? Yeah.
station.
Right,
You'd have to have at least those in the middle of something.
Right.
Oh, and a satellite school, wanna do that? So it gets, it can get so convoluted and crazy, you just wanna say,
Right.
this is not what we're doing because we believe in 15-minute neighborhoods, which would coincide better with a municipality than it
Correct.
would out in the middle of nowhere. Even though people can.
Yeah, I mean, we still have hundreds and hundreds of lots out of the
Oh, yes,
country
we do.
for sure.
that are approved and
Yeah.
Ready to
people
go.
can, without getting further permission,
Yeah, exactly right.
build something.
Yeah.
But this does coincide with a change both in demographics and in market, because the demand for 2-acre or 5-acre subdivisions has pretty much disappeared over the last 10 years.
It's declining fast, yeah.
And there just isn't much demand for it, and we
Right.
have, I don't know, 10 or 12 subdivisions that were approved before 2008 that are that kind of thing that have just sat there.
Yeah. And so I think the idea is that, and we could take a look at how this is worded, but if the county steps back and look at itself and its municipal partners and identifies where these goods and services and amenities currently are, then you apply this rule to where those areas are and say, as new, denser or varied residential developments begin to come into play, they ought to be located in relative close proximity to where these areas are already serviced.
Yeah, but the world's gonna change. It's changing right now.
It's gonna continue to change.
It's not what we're talking. Like I said, the county doesn't want empty lots. I get
Correct.
that. And we've always had that, okay? We talk about the 15-minute village. It's not realistic. Only if you're in a municipality.
Or
That's
near
why,
one,
that's
right.
why I say there's gotta be a segment on virtuality
Well,
with the 15-minute. Because that can be achieved, and we can zone that. They have to bring in broadband to do that. They have to, that's the future in 2050.
If I can real quick, just to sort of to pick up on the thought of this. I don't think, because this is about land use and the physicality of.
We're talking about housing. We're talking about 15-minute village.
Yes,
If we
but-
stick to a 15-minute village, we're antiquating ourselves.
Well, no, but here's what I'm getting at. So we're talking about land use. And so it's residential and commercial and employment and all those things in close proximity. But there's a physicality to what is on the ground. I think the idea of sort of the virtual access to things ought to be in the economic development section, and I think it ought to be in the infrastructure section, because that allows people to work from anywhere regardless of where they live, shop from anywhere regardless of where they live, access to the world anywhere they live. And if you talk about a virtual 15 minutes, and if I were gonna draw a geography of what I had access to in a virtual 15-minute, it'd be a picture of the planet.
Yeah,
Not the
okay.
county, I mean, it would be, It would be the entire globe.
But we have to embrace that somehow.
Yeah, but it's not in the, this is what I'm saying.
It's just not in
You're
the-
exactly correct, but it's not in the land use chapter. Because that whole notion of that is you could live anywhere, it's not tied to land use arrangements, because it's virtual, so it needs to.
But the broadband is already brought up.
Pardon?
The broadband issue is
Yeah,
already
right,
brought up.
so we need to
The
make sure
economic
that.
development.
Neighborhoods is in both housing and economic
Yeah,
development chapter.
so I think it's in a lot, I think it could be in more than one section, you're exactly right. The county has to ensure the ability to have access to everything the world has to offer, 100%. But that's maybe the only concept that's not tied to the physicality of ground. So it probably has a place in several other chapters, but I think the only chapter that notion might not have is in land use.
Okay.
Yeah.
Charlie?
In my view, the biggest housing problem the county has is affordability. 2/3 of the people who work in the county don't live in the county because they can't afford to. And I think that could stand to be stressed more than it is right now.
Okay. Did you guys, here, I'm gonna give you this so you can write it again. He's saying we may need to address more affordability.
And not just
Yeah.
the term of art affordable.
Sure.
But
Accessible, accountable, whatever.
accessible to
Yeah.
our median employee, if you will.
The term that gets picked up a lot around the country is attainable housing.
Yes.
And especially if you use the term affordable, Illinois defines what that is specifically. So, but your idea is right, and this is what dovetails well with the 15-minute notion. If you're not gonna have affordable housing that's on 1 acre lots with a big house. I mean, right, of course. So it's gonna be a different type of housing product. And if you're going to appropriately serve the people who may be living there, it should be close to goods and services and retail and shops or whatever, which is that 15-minute notion. So that's how it all begins to dovetail together. So you're exactly right.
Yeah.
So I think that leads into what just my comments on the chapter itself. First of all, I love the graphic here with all the variation.
Okay.
I think a lot of people think of single family or multifamily as the one or the other, but there's a
Missing middle,
it's a
yeah.
wonderful graphic, I love it.
Thanks.
Yeah, the 15-minute neighborhoods, I thought both section 2.3 that talks about infill and 1.4 that talks about identifying failing commercial corridors and replacing with multifamily housing. And those are both the opposite, where rather than trying to encourage the commercial growth closer to the residential, we're putting the residential into the failed commercial, basically. Which I think is a key part of it. I don't know if either of those need to be referenced again in the third section. I kept writing 15-minute neighborhoods, and then I got to section 3 and like, oh, there it is, 15-minute neighborhoods. So I liked it.
Good.
My big question is, we talked earlier about the metrics and measuring and benchmarking where we are now. Is there any metrics for measuring how we have gotten there? Or, is there any, the closest I can think of is like a walk score kind of a thing?
I'd hate to see a walk score in McHenry County.
But there's places in McHenry County that are great. I mean,
Sure, there's no question.
So, like, for example, I work for the city of Woodstock. Our overall walk score is in the neighborhood of 30 overall, right? But there's places in downtown that are as high as 90.
Yeah.
So.
Do we talk about walk score at all? At all?
No,
I don't know if it's that measurement, but something like that.
It's,
so we can measure.
I mean, walk score is a pretty obscure thing unless you are literally in the industry. And even people in the industry are like, walk score. I mean, like it's.
Well, they have it on like Zillow.
But
I was gonna say, I mean, it's Zillow, it has that for every single house
The notion
here.
of like, this idea of, can I within 15 or 20 minutes walk to 90% of the things that I might need, and I don't have to rely on a car? And not only is it a distance thing, like as the crow flies, are there sidewalks? Can I cross the street?
Exactly.
Is there, stuff like that. So this notion of sort of like this livability, concentric area, or this 15 or 20 minute city node is within that walk distance, can I get to stuff? And
exactly. That's my question, I guess, is there examples that we might be able to give in the plan that would help paint that picture and say, for example, downtown Algonquin, downtown Woodstock, downtown whatever, are examples of that goal?
I suppose we could have a call out and, of, examples of 15-minute whatever in McHenry County. We can maybe call out a few and try to find some. We can work with Algonquin or Woodstock or Huntley or some of the other communities to see if we can't find examples of that. They're not gonna be in the middle of the county. They're gonna be with municipal partners. Right.
Is there anywhere existing and unincorporated in McHenry County?
Yeah,
This is
that'd be
a
better.
small model.
But I'm not sure we have.
I don't know. It's a good question. I don't
Crossroads
know.
communities that actually
I doubt
have
it.
the services we're talking about?
They're all antique shops.
Ice cream
Well,
stores.
Yeah, ice
Maybe-
cream stores,
maybe
it stands out.
Maybe
Alden.
Alden is about
They have
close.
Quick Mart.
Yeah, they took over a lot of their
Couldn't get
cases.
to a doctor, I guess, unless there might be some.
And there is a, I want to be mindful of practical applications of good ideas. You know what I'm saying? These are valid and good things. They don't have homes everywhere. And they don't have practical application everywhere. And a Walk Score 96 is not going to exist in the middle of a county, any county, right? And so we had to sort of talk about these notions, what the values or principles are behind them, and are there opportunities to build upon these principles strategically within the county. So like, if someone is looking to build a mixed residential development, can we work with our municipal partners to locate them in a location that would allow people to walk to goods and services and the walk score would be higher? Is it a 15-minute environment we can create? So let's accommodate the residential, but strategically, where does it go? And that's where it sort of fits into this section, is that identifying residential development strategically as to where it should go. And one of the barometers would be, if we locate it here, are we helping to create a 15-minute environment? So it's more of a location designation determinant than anything else. Would it support that idea?
Which would generally be where you have city water and sewer.
Yeah.
To be able to get to everything that you need to get to, you have to have all those.
Infrastructure.
that infrastructure
Right.
set up first.
And the reason we're introducing this notion of residential and commercial areas, I mean, commercial areas are historically very safely guarded because it's tax revenue, right? And you have to have it. But to your point, retail isn't what it used to be. Anecdotally, planning used to say, okay, like Illinois 47, get out the red marker and just commercial for 8 miles. Well, there's no way that's gonna all be commercial. The market just will not bear it. So you have to look at locations like where do you have commercial nodes around some of the key intersections? And then maybe in between, you put in some pretty cool residential development. They can get on a frontage sidewalk and get to anything they want. Pace routes up and down the street, they can get to transit, to get to employment. So maybe some of the new residential has to be in places that historically used to be designated for commercial. It would bolster the local retail, local services, local restaurants, that had access to BRT, bus rapid transit along the corridor. They could walk or bike. I mean, so we have to start thinking about things like that, and cities are. And that 15-minute idea is part of that. So we can look to see if there's some examples in the county. I don't know of any offhand, but we can check. So.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I think it could be illustrated.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
Okay, we can check. All right, the next one is, oh yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah.
It's a little more specific to one of the sections in the housing, is that okay?
Yeah, for sure, go ahead.
Okay, cool. It's 1.5, encourage the development of ancillary dwelling units in A1 and A2 agricultural districts to provide additional housing for agricultural workers. And then in the paragraph, it talks about obviously the agricultural piece, and it does go into, the other alternative housing that might be included in there, like the granny pods or whatnot. Can we make that more clear in the title that, we are open to that piece of things too? Because I know that the county is pretty good about allowing things, that sort of a development on.
Let's go with Renee on an answer for that.
That was one thing, I haven't given them any comments or anything yet, because I wanted to hear from you guys first, but that was one thing that I flagged, and I don't know why that was so specific to A1 and A2. That is one, like, really great thing, I think, that we have going here, is that we allow the ancillary dwelling units in all zoning districts. So, we also have some additional ag housing, like we allow mobile homes for ag employee housing. And so maybe we incorporate that too, but yeah. Thank you, Michelle.
All right, good point. Anybody else or no? No? Okay. All right, next up is economic development. Again, this is, obviously pretty huge. It ties in with everything else. Key takeaways are identify strategic locations for commercial and industrial development, and identify strategic locations for, look at that, twice. It's so important. We're gonna do the exact same thing twice to make sure we get it right, in case you were wondering. What's missing was a slide that said conservation 4 times. But economic development, twice. So
I think it's supposed to say, facilitate workforce development opportunities to prepare McHenry County's youth and career launchers to meet the needs of emerging industries and foster entrepreneurship.
that's exactly right. One of the unique things that counties have that sometimes cities don't is large tracts of land, depending on development, right? But usually when those get developed for employment types of uses, they need infrastructure the county can't provide, so they get incorporated, right?
Charlie?
This is happening sort of at an awkward time for this plan, but the city of Harvard is undertaking a feasibility and site selection study for a massive infrastructure project. There was an economic impact study done a year ago by R1 that said that if this goes forward, it would create, it would increase the county's GDP by 40% over what it otherwise would be and create 37,000 jobs.
A lot of jobs.
I think all I would say about it right now is that the feasibility and site selection are underway right now. In a year or two, a decision will be made whether to really go forward with it. And if they do, a whole bunch of stuff, particularly economic development and transportation, are going to need to be reviewed.
What's the use?
Airport.
Okay, yeah. Every once in a while, and this is the challenge of planning. There are certain things that fall outside the normal curve of economic predictions.
Yeah.
Like that. You can't say like, well, we did an overview of the market area and you guys should have an airport. Like those things don't emerge in analyses.
Yeah.
They're opportunity driven. They come out of nowhere. And so, yeah, that would be a game changer. No question. Yeah. It'd be a game changer. But you can't plan for it. That's until you know it's a thing, right? That's the tough part.
Yeah, we have to wait until we
right.
see if it's reasonable.
That's exactly right. But you look at sort of like, look down, like what's happening down on Huntley at 47 and 90. Look at all the industrial, all the warehouse stuff that's gone in down there versus a handful of years ago. Like that stuff is popping up all over. The other thing is not just the logistics things, but data centers. Data centers are weird. They're just as big, but they don't generate any traffic. They have virtually no employment. Yeah. They use a ton of infrastructure, and so but they generate a ton of revenue. So they're weird consumers of land in large development. It's an odd thing, right? The ugly thing about it mostly is they almost all come with a nice building, but next to it is a transformer station, which is ugly. But so the economic development thing, the key thing here is strategically locating where these large things might go so as not to, again, locate prematurely in areas of conservation or ag land that would disrupt those areas. So, and when people think of economic development, unfortunately too often they think about just retail and restaurants and service uses, whatever else, not the employment stuff, not the industrial stuff, not the manufacturing side of things, and that's huge, so. And again, this is how the chapter is laid out with examples and best practices. And again, is anybody have any questions for the economic development chapter that they've reviewed it? Again, the good thing is most of the detailed recommendations and objectives you've all seen before. So.
I have a couple comments.
Yeah, just shoot.
I have some comments on just the phrasing of 1.2. I could probably go over those with you offline. Just I would rearrange the sequencing of the sentences a little bit. The 1.8, there's a couple references to the existing line or the Union Pacific line. I think we're talking about two primary lines that go through the county. There's the one that goes over to Moraine, to the FCA plant in Belvedere that it's referring to, and there's the other that carries the Union Pacific, or the UP Northwest Metro line that primarily heads northwest up to Janesville.
Yep.
So I think it's actually two main lines that go through the county rather than just one. And then the other, just in the entrepreneurship section and just the resources for young people, one thing that I'm personally involved in that I thought might be worth mentioning is I think almost all of the high schools in the county are now doing, working off the same curriculum of entrepreneurship classes. And that's actually being, in most of the cases, being offered as a dual credit class with MCC as well. And then MCC now does like a countywide entrepreneurship competition at the end of the year where they pit all of the best class projects from each of the high schools against each other at that level. And Incubator EDU is the name of the curriculum, but it's an entrepreneurship program that's being offered, I believe, in all 15 high schools in the county now.
That's great.
So
that's cool. All right.
Any other comments yet? Short ones? Okay, thank you.
All right, the next chapter is transportation. This was largely done by KLOA. We worked with KLOA for years on a number of different communities. Some of the key things: a Vision Zero, safe for all users, complete and connected multimodal network, efficient movement of people and goods, mobility and access for all, and protecting environmental resources. I think one of the biggest shifts, and again, harder to employ in a county level than a city level, is more of a focus on individual mobility than vehicular or larger scale mobility. Does every individual have the ability to easily and safely move around? Regardless of mode of travel, I guess that's the most important thing. But part of the charm of a county and why people live here is there is a rural and an agricultural flavor. So you're not going to have sidewalks all over. You're going to have people that live a far distance away from things. And so mobility takes on a different component in the county than it does. But we talk about the different transportation components, the vision for it, different key intersection improvements or key corridor improvements. And we try to address, in this chapter, KLOA tries to address all the different modes of transportation. So it's not just vehicular, but we touch on all of them to the extent practical and possible in the county. So I'm not going to go through all of them, but if anybody read through the transportation section, if they have any comments or questions or anything like that. Yeah.
So one thing in transportation, I think I came on the board after the board had already discussed it, but I live very close to Boone County. I farm a little myself. If the county continues growing, it's great to want to preserve ag, but we have significant issues with the traffic. Everybody wants to live in the ag, but boy, they want to fly on our roads, especially with equipment out there. And there's stop signs trying to get people slowed down, but they blow. It's happening up the Kishwaukee and County Line. It's happening at River Road and County Line where I live. Somehow the county, if you're going to continue to expand, they're going to have to somehow redo the major east-west corridors to try and get people off of some of these smaller ag roads.
Good point.
And there's really nothing in there addressing it, but it's going to become a bigger and bigger problem.
So the need to sort of establish primary east-west thoroughfares to take the current sort of, for lack of a cut-through traffic on some of the smaller county roads.
Yeah, Thirdly Way, for instance, to hook up Kishwaukee Valley, clear over to Belvedere off of Poplar Grove, somehow come up with another thoroughfare between 20 and 73 as an example.
Okay. Yeah, people do move pretty fast sometimes on those roads with
Yeah.
no shoulders and narrow lanes. And you come up on a tractor with a orange triangle in the back going slow and you turn a corner, it's.
I mean, we've had people go down in the ditches trying to get around you because they just don't want to wait an extra 5
Impatient,
seconds.
yeah.
I had, where I live, going in my drive the other night, I guess I took too long to get off the road and I got the horn and somebody came flying up behind me.
That's scary.
I mean, it's, yeah, the people just don't want to slow down.
Okay. Is there, and we can check with, and maybe, Adam, you know, are there designated east-west thoroughfares now that are, and maybe it's in the plan, that IDOT has designated for widening or designating as an SRA to take the leaf off of some of the other? You know offhand?
Well, there are SRA designations, but they're 20, 30 years old,
That's the
and
thing.
nothing's happened.
So are any on the 10 or 20-year or less plan for widening, or?
If those discussions have happened, they haven't happened, you know, here with us.
Okay, we should find that out. We'll work with KLOA to find that out. And if there aren't any on the books now, we should probably see if KLOA can maybe preliminarily identify some ones that potentially could be designated for that. So that's a real good suggestion.
Yeah, well, there's nothing significant in the 5-year plan.
Okay.
And frankly, when you go out beyond 2 years, the out years aren't funded anyhow.
Yeah, no,
So there's some things that have been on
yeah.
year 4 for 40 years.
And when the federal transportation bill gets approved, you watch things on that hit list jockey for priority. They change fast. Like
Yes.
things can be on the 20-year list, all of a sudden it's being done next year. That stuff's crazy. But you're right, because you don't want to get to the point of being a real problem and then doing it at that point. If you can sort of put those relief valves in place before it gets a problem, then it grows into it, right?
I mean, the police, when you talk to them about, because obviously the police can't patrol the whole county. So when Henry County Sheriff, you see a squad car maybe twice a day out there, you're lucky.
Yeah.
And they basically have told us, because we've complained, isn't there some way to put a few more stop signs up? And he says, until there's enough head counts, death head counts, they won't even begin to look at that.
Yeah, they call those warrants, and if an intersection doesn't meet the warrants, they won't put up a stop sign. Because if there is an accident, the first thing an attorney's gonna do if their client is involved in an accident is they'll say like, that stop sign shouldn't have been there anyway because it didn't meet the warrants necessary for a stop sign to be there. So the state and counties are hesitant, and even municipalities. So municipalities are beginning to get out ahead of it a little bit, but they're hesitant to put a stop sign up where warrants are not met. Because if they do, they can say like, shouldn't have been there anyway, then it's a mess. So they stick to those pretty carefully.
Now, Scott will be here. I believe he said he would be able to be here at the next meeting, and we can talk to him about that at that time or any time before what can be done. Because there's always stuff going on, and it's who owns the roadway,
Right.
how much money has been let, how much has been appropriated,
Yeah.
what's on what, as soon as you get to IDOT and what they can do, and it's just a myriad of things that have to happen. And as Mr. Housel has said, you get on a list for puts, I guess is what it is that you, with IDOT, that we can get that going, and it sits in limbo. You've got everything ready, and it doesn't get done. So when it is ready to go on, you have to do some more work to get it done, so it makes it take longer. And the further out you go and the less traffic there is, the more you notice, because it's less traffic and all of a sudden it's going crazy. So we can talk about that next time. Thank you.
One of the most,
Thing about
oh, go ahead.
roundabouts too, and
Taylor?
the roundabouts are a traffic slowing device.
Oh, for sure.
Taylor,
yeah.
can you speak up so they can hear it on this, or was that a side?
No, I just said that we also included something about roundabouts, and
Yes.
roundabouts are a traffic slowing device.
And it's a way to get traffic to slow down.
Yeah, and I guess one of the truisms that I've noticed from doing this across the country for more years than I care to admit. Traffic problems or roadway problems are often among the highest priority problems a community faces, right? And they're almost always the last to be addressed. And that frustrates people. And the reason being is twofold, largely. They're multi-jurisdictional issues. Even if a city wants to solve the problem, or even if a county wants to solve the problem, it's DOT controlled. Sometimes if a city wants to solve a problem, it's county controlled. And if you don't have jurisdiction, you can't just change stuff, right? So that's frustrating. And the other thing is, even if there's consensus to make the improvement, capital improvements cost millions and millions and millions and millions of bucks. And so they're always put off for some funding bill years in the future. So transportation can be a frustrating thing to tackle because they're hugely important. And they're often the last to be addressed, and that's a frustrating combination.
Well, and NEPA is used to delay things all the time.
Infinitely, yeah. I'm amazed that Dubai can build an island and from scratch in like a year, and to do an 8-mile extension for $355 takes 22 years to get through the NEPA lawsuits. I'm like, it's a wonder we're falling behind. Yeah, I know.
I do have information from Scott. He says it's a good discussion. Harmony Road is probably the only east-west corridor with potential for capacity increase
Okay.
right now. Thank you.
Worth looking into,
Yeah,
for sure.
and that's a county road.
And that's a county road.
There you go, I had to make that happen.
Yeah, you get
Done. Check, next problem. Done.
You'll write the check in the morning.
That's right,
Look
yeah.
how easy this is.
Already working on the press release.
One small thing in 1.2 of, under the roundabouts, there's a line about how the county has identified some future planned locations for roundabouts, including Congress Parkway and Federal Drive and Congress Parkway and Exchange Drive and Crystal Lake. And those are, they happened, they're there, so.
They're already there.
Yeah, they're already.
Right. If anybody ever pushes back and says they don't like roundabouts because they don't work or whatever, you guys ever seen that show Mythbusters? You can admit you watch it, it's okay, it's a safe space. You can admit you like the show. Years and years and years ago, they did one about roundabouts. Because the two guys on the show, they're like, there's no way these are better than intersections, they just didn't buy it. So they did a scientific experiment to like take a run at the whole notion of roundabouts to see if it actually worked. They got like, I don't know, 100 drivers. They set up like an typical intersection 4-way stop. They randomized if you were gonna go through it, turn left or turn right. They got a bunch of people. And they did it with traditional intersection and with roundabouts. And they're like, oh my God, it works so much better, so safer. It moves like 38% more traffic. Like, it was really, it's a cool episode. It's only like 7 or 8 minutes long, but you can like YouTube search it. It's a fun little thing to watch.
Yeah, it starts to fall apart at about 20,000 ATD though.
Yeah, right. Oh yeah, no, and there are states now that have a roundabout first policy.
Yeah.
At the state, the DOT level, where they have to demonstrate a roundabout won't work, and then they go to a traditional intersection. They don't have to show that the intersection has viability. You have to show the roundabout won't work.
I was in Carmel, Indiana the other day, and it is roundabout after roundabout.
It's the roundabout capital of the world, Carmel, Indiana. Go into Google Maps, you know, and just Google Carmel, Indiana, and it'll show you like a satellite view. Hundreds. You can just zoom in and pan around and look at them. They invented new styles of roundabouts. I'm not joking.
I was kind of disappointed. I was doing a best practices tour over there a couple months ago, and their promotional people at their website say that they don't have any roundabouts. They also said, or they don't have any traditional stoplights. They also said they don't have any potholes. That was the other thing. That
any what?
Potholes. They said they have 0 potholes in the town, which, you know, it's a moving target.
Yeah.
But the guy from the city that was giving us our tour, he admitted that they actually do have 7 stoplights still in town.
Isn't that funny? Yeah.
Liars.
Yeah. But it is.
But I have like 140 plus roundabouts.
It's remarkable, and they actually like design different ones, like 2 close to each other, like an hourglass, and like and it's remarkably, but people come there from all over, but just Google it. You don't have to know where they are, just Google the town. You can see them, but just zoom in and look at them. It is pretty remarkable, you're exactly right. Carmel, Indiana. It's a nice town. The next one is water resources. I'm not gonna claim to be a water resource expert. This is clearly a very, very important component. Most comprehensive plans, water is folded into an environmental chapter, but here it actually stands out as its own chapter. So, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, can we go back to that first slide for a second?
Sure.
Water resources? Is that one of the dams that we're portraying in the image there? It's just an interesting choice, given all the controversy with the dams right now. I don't know if that's just me, because dams are my whole world right now, and everyone's talking about removing the dams, not removing the dams, but as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh, that's an interesting.
We can put it in a different form.
Maybe that's just me.
As soon as you saw that, you said, okay.
Oh, damn, I was a little worried.
That almost looks like it's in St. Charles or Geneva area.
That one is really controversial right now.
Oh, the St. Charles one is, yeah.
The St. Charles one is, yes.
So maybe the one we have in Algonquin
Yep.
might be considered for a picture.
And it's just a picture, it doesn't mean much, but some people are very scrumply about the dam.
That stuff matters more than.
It does, if they see it, they might close.
There's a lot more people that just look at pictures than read, so, pictures matter. So we gotta change a photo, we change a photo.
Just put an ice creek, the Fox River, I don't know, something like that.
We can definitely change, that's the sort of stuff, I'm glad somebody's picking up on that.
Simple,
because
Sewage treatment facility there.
That's what we need, right, yeah.
Picture of some discharge coming out of the plant.
Some gray water, some brown water.
But if you've got Algonquin, and from whatever picture you take it, you can take it from such a way that people can see that's part of a 15-minute neighborhood.
Yeah, the Fox River, just adjacent to the downtown, it's interesting because it's accessible from the west bank. It's got some pretty deep corridors, but across is a pretty steep slope that's really, vegetated with homes and stuff on the very top. But that's a nice, run of the Fox River there.
Yeah.
I agree. I agree. All right, so we talk a lot about sustainability, integrity of the water supply and groundwater resources. Increase opportunities to collaborate with McHenry County communities on key water resource related issues, work to address overarching water quality issues, contribute to improve stormwater management approaches in McHenry County. So it's stormwater, it's groundwater recharge, it's water use, it's infiltration, it's point and non-point pollution sources. It's increasingly vital. You have a lot of it and you want to protect it, but it's so important to McHenry that it's called out as its own chapter. It's one of the few comprehensive plans that we've worked on that does it. We've worked on some in Colorado that have their own chapters on water because it's so essential in Colorado as well. We did a plan in Aurora, just outside of Denver, Colorado, a few years back, and I was interviewing the mayor. And one of the first questions I said, what do you think are the 3 biggest issues facing Aurora? It's a town of 400,000 people. And he's like, let's see, water, number 2, water, issue number 3, water. What's your next question? And he wasn't joking. So.
We have a lot and they have very little.
That's 2 different problems. You want to protect what you have, they wish they had more. Colorado is essentially a desert, people all know that. So anyway, I won't go into all the different sections, but we try to put in here best practice case scenarios. And again, it goes everything from aquifer recharge and protecting those areas all the way up to stormwater management and groundwater quality issues. So if anybody has any, and we're lucky we had some, we've got really good environmental folks on the team, which is great. I think though, that was probably some of the more challenging text to filter into readable text. Because they're scientists, ecologists, and water people. They're not Mark Twain. So writing succinctly, they're ecologically minded, not storytellers. They're more scientists, right, or ecologists. So getting that into a context-driven, rationale foundation text was challenging. So, but the content is really thorough. So they did a good job of that. Likewise, green infrastructure, I won't go into the details on this. This is something that is typically folded into the infrastructure or facilities chapter of most plans. Again, here it's its own, so conserve sensitive natural areas and open space, improve stewardship in natural areas, update McHenry County's green infrastructure plan, data layers. You already have a lot of this on the books. You're sort of leading the way compared to a lot of counties with regard to environmental conservation and green infrastructure planning, which is fantastic. Review and update conservation development principles, expand greenway and trail connections, and preserve and expand and restore the oak woodlands. It's funny, they gave one of the things I remember this, they had a case study call-out box for oak woodlands. And usually a call-out is a couple of paragraphs. I think it was like 3 pages.
That's our guy, Ed.
And I'm like, oh my God, this is like a chapter. And it's supposed to be like a paragraph call-out. I'm like, oh my God. That was an editing challenge. But some of them, and just reading, I'm thinking like, this is fascinating. This is like, historically, this is fascinating stuff. You almost don't want any of it to live on the cutting room floor. But if we didn't, this chapter would be 87 pages. But the content was really fascinating. And it's impressive that you have that level of subject matter expert as a resource. It really was remarkable. So those guys should write a book, like a book, like Water in McHenry County, because they probably sell. It's pretty fascinating. But again, I'm not going to go through all the components of this because I'm not an expert on water or on green infrastructure. We put in a lot of plans, but this is a level of detail that far exceeds most planning documents. So if you have any questions on this, let us know. We can let the subs know. And then the next one is energy infrastructure. We're going to have to find a home for what you were talking about before, about making sure that the county infrastructure includes broadband and access to the world. I mean,
Yes.
that is, if you remember back in the 90s when cell towers were just coming online, right? And I can remember going to public hearings where a cell tower was proposed like 2 miles away from an elementary school. And the meeting room, the city hall would be hundreds and hundreds of parents convinced the cell tower was 2 miles from the elementary school, their kids were gonna get cancer. I mean, it was crazy.
And you're right on that, because I own a piece of property next to, it's now Second Amendment.
Right?
And I wanted to put a cell tower there because of the revenue that I was going to achieve from that. And they had Landmark School there.
Yeah.
Knocked it down.
Yeah, but what happened as a result, and I'm trying to get to the notion of sort of this broadband or internet access. When cell towers first came online, across the country, cities were just denying them. I think I was a planner at Wilmette at the time in the North Shore, and so after a while, the cell companies were like, this is cutting edge technology, this is gonna change, whatever. The federal government stepped in and said, it was the Federal Telecommunications Act. And they said, this is necessary infrastructure. It's like roads, sewer, water, and electricity. And cities, you cannot deny it outright. You can put parameters on where they can go, what they can look like, blah, 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 but you cannot prevent coverage. Which is why cities almost immediately started putting cell towers on their property. Right?
Oh, where's the revenue on
City
that?
halls and the water towers at the public works facilities, right? Because they got all the revenue. But the federal government had to come in and say, necessary infrastructure. You cannot prevent it. And that's what got cell towers all over the place. Broadband is now the same sort of thing, right? It's not to that point where the federal government has to mandate it now because it's less innocuous in terms of the infrastructure going in. It's costly, but it's not visually an eyesore. But if you want a business park, a research park, a hospital, whatever, and you don't have access to broadband, good luck getting that economic development off the ground. You won't. It is necessary infrastructure. So the fact that you say we have to address it robustly, I think we got to find at least 2 or 3 places in the plan to introduce it for different reasons, but all getting at the same thing. So you're exactly right. Yeah. So this talks a lot about energy efficiency in existing buildings and new construction, creating targeted and proactive approaches to renewable energy, promoting energy conservation and public education, and sort of working to sort of collaborate to get the EV infrastructure in place. And I don't know this, do you guys have any solar farms? We've written,
Excuse me.
we've written a lot of ordinances for solar farms and wind farms in different parts of the country, and it's amazing. In some places, they're well received, in some places, they're not at all.
We have 78 that approved and what, 7 or 8 that have been built?
Yeah, 7.
Yeah. And I know like Michigan just passed some new laws about solar in agricultural areas. And now there are a couple of solar companies that are just going around offering deals to any farmer that will let them put stuff on. So that's happening all over Michigan as well. So again, if you see anything in the infrastructure chapter that you want, again, it's laid out like everything else. Each recommendation is very specific, then each paragraph underneath each recommendation or objective clearly states why, what's going on, best practice, why the county should consider it and how it should go about doing it. So each paragraph is self-contained. But again, and I guess I would say for green infrastructure, for energy, and maybe for water, more so than land planning, conservation, or economic, these may be chapters to keep your eye out for terminology you don't recognize for a glossary. Even if you try to be user-friendly, this gets into some pretty nuanced best practice leading text sort of stuff that people just don't know. And it changes rapidly. So as you go through this, it may help that it's not your area of expertise, because you might read something and say, I don't know what that is. Like, this would be a good glossary term. So keep these chapters particularly in mind for glossary type stuff. And then chapter 11 is historic preservation. Again, pretty straightforward. Identify and plan for enhanced historic rural crossroads, local main streets, semi-rural and urban communities. Identify and plan for preservation. Identify and plan for preservation of the county's rural landscapes. So there's historic preservation of built components, and then there's a preservation of natural stuff as well. And both are very important part of historic preservation. And then coordinate with local municipalities and governmental agencies for relevant private and nonprofit organizations. So pretty straightforward, but very important. McHenry County has some really good historic resources, and I think it's just really important.
This is back to the picture thing. Why is there a train for historic? Because I know we have the railroad museum, but.
It's a really old train. I'm just kidding. I don't. We could put a house there or a structure or a barn or something. Yeah. Would you rather see like an agricultural historic thing, like a silo or a barn, or just an old building, or any preference?
Well, the historic crossroads, those look nice.
That'd be kind of cool too, right? Right.
Woodstock Square.
Yeah, the courthouse. It's on the very next page on the map. I was just reading.
Just a train just seems a little odd to me.
Okay, we can change that.
Or just label it and say, this is
an old train.
This is a really old train.
Right.
But that's
It's an
not
old
the
train,
goal, is
photo
to
taken by an
preserve
old guy
trains.
with a really old
Chapter.
camera.
But
I would
big-
say,
the big deal is
We're just
we
trying to keep you guys on
we
track.
do have the train museum in Union.
Right.
It's
right,
huge.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
but
there you
that's not
go.
what our chapter's about, you know?
But that's
It has the
That's
word
your
museum in it.
crossroads.
It's historic.
It's historic, and it has 42,000 people come to see the trains
I
every year.
know.
And
My
they can't
grandfather's
get there.
streetcar is there.
Is it?
My grandfather's streetcar that he used to drive.
That's kind of
Yeah.
cool.
But it just doesn't, to me, it doesn't fit with historic.
Okay, that's easy enough, right? Easy enough.
This
Good
side
call.
of the board,
Yeah, we're
this side of the
historical.
board, we're the
We're the
historical.
oldest ones, except that. If you go to the general store in Greenwood, it's right up
See
47.
if you can preserve us.
That would be a historical, because it's that whole area. It's got a school there, but the old general store has been a house, it's been all kinds of stuff. That might be a picture. Keeping it local, and I suggested this to Renee when I was sending out my notes, is saying with all these pictures, if we can get them as close to local as we can, and have some kind of contest for kids to say, where are all these pictures taken? And then we can have something, so they gotta go see their parents go see this place, get
Well,
tickets.
that's what you're saying, we should
Find
ask the
Waldo?
kids if there's something cool and old, we should take a picture of it, all say like their parents. Right? Take a picture of dad, he's old.
Grandpa.
The Westchester Public Library did something like that, a couple of years back, where they did basically like a historic building scavenger hunt kind of a thing. And
Oh, that's kinda
it got a
cool.
lot of
Yeah.
participation. It was fun.
And it's something,
The Opera House.
if we're not going to do the fair this year, that would be something we could do instead to get people to go around and work with the
Explore
historical
the county, yeah.
society to do it. Let's say, these are the pictures, where are they? And then, you know, have tickets and people, there's all kinds of stuff we
Right.
could do. It's something we could talk about later. But the closer to what we really have, like, I don't recognize the one on the left, but the one on the right is the general store
In
in,
Greenwood.
Yeah,
there
you go.
Greenwood.
That's a cool one.
Okay, well, we'll throw some other photos up there. And as you go through, if there's any other photos that you think are misses, just let us know.
So just a good structural question then, are these photos gonna have small captions on them, or is that not typical in your plans?
No, it's not typical. There's so many photos in this that would be tough. So typically, no. If it's sometimes we'll do plans where we're talking about something specific like a pedestrian arcade in a commercial area as a best practice, blah, blah, blah. We show a photo of one, we'll say, if it's an example of what we're talking about, best practice in that community, we'll label it. But this is just sort of eye candy to set the tone for what it is we're talking about. So they're not labeled, yeah.
Hey, the Durant, I think it's called the Durant House in Crystal Lake. Is that what it's called? There's a beautiful restored house with oak trees, I believe.
Okay,
Like, I think it's called the
you said the
Durant.
Durant
Where
House?
is it? On the corner of
It's on Terracotta,
and
yeah.
176?
Yeah.
I don't know what that, I don't think it's,
I don't
Well,
think it's
the
at the
Palmer
Ram House.
Colonel
I
Palmer.
don't think it's at the Ram
Yeah,
House.
Is
the
it
Colonel
the
Palmer House.
Colonel Palmer House
It's
is right
Colonel
on
Palmer
Pin-
House.
Yeah,
Okay,
And I think there might be oak trees there.
there, yeah.
yes,
definitely.
there are.
Yeah, that would be a
Right
cool
next,
one.
right next to offices and
It's on Terracotta.
residential and commercial. It's all right in there.
and I guess this is sort of a general call, and sometimes counties or cities and communities that we work with, because now everything lives and breathes on the internet, they now have really amazing libraries of photographs.
Yeah.
Right.
And cities didn't used to, because what are they gonna do with them, right? But now they all do, and so if you have photos that you think might be good, or anybody here has photos, as long as it's, the digital quality is good enough to print well and big, it can't be a crummy photo, but if you've got a photo that you think is just perfect, like, give it to Adam, and he can say, hey, maybe we could use this photo for this. And so if you got ones that you think are great of a specific thing, let us know. So we get those a lot from people.
How do we want to send you that, Dropbox? What
Sounds
I'm
great.
thinking is gonna be bigger than email.
What's that?
So it'll be, I've got a lot
Yeah.
of bigger photos.
Yeah,
Sounds good.
perfect.
No, that's awesome.
All right, so that is a quick walkthrough of all the chapters so far. The only ones you don't have yet are, again, the introduction and community profile or county profile. And those are pretty straightforward. There's no recommendations in those, right? It's just, we want to make sure we want to capture what those chapters are intended to be. And one is just that, we set the table for the plan and the process, and the other one is sort of a snapshot. But it's primarily a combination of the existing conditions report that you guys have already seen and a summary of the community outreach that we conducted and what the key takeaways were from that outreach. That's chapter 2.
And a glossary of terms.
Yeah, glossary of terms, right.
I did set one up with Trish to begin with.
Yeah, Tricia's been working on one.
Okay, right.
And Tricia is now, you guys may have met Tricia before. She was gone for a few months on maternity. She's
Right.
been now back for a couple of weeks.
Good.
So we missed her. I'm glad to have her back. And
I'm sorry,
Xander's a
Michelle?
cute little kid.
Yeah,
Sorry about that.
we had talked a lot and went back and forth about the verbiage of the themes. Is that included in the introduction too? Okay, cool. 'Cause I saw
Themes
the-
is where we introduce that notion. So
Okay,
it's sort of we're sort of planting a flag and saying, hey, these things are important. And they're so important, they don't have just one chapter. These ideals or principles, these themes are echoed throughout the entire document, and we call them out throughout the document.
yeah, I've seen the little like symbols
Yep,
on there.
and that's
That's
all-
as far as we've gotten so far.
Correct.
Yeah, I
And
just
that-
wanted to make sure because we labored that
Yes,
point.
so that notion and what those are and why is part of the
Okay,
introduction.
cool.
All right, so next steps, to develop the implementation chapter. So once we have all the other chapters done and reviewed, which we have except the introduction and the community profile, there's no recommendations in there. We create an implementation chapter. An implementation chapter is how can the county begin to implement this plan over the next 20 years, right? So that's always the last chapter that we produce. So we haven't produced it yet. But what it is there's no recommendations in that, it's just how to begin to roll this thing out over time. So that's the only chapter that is yet to be pulled together. And that's it. So that is an overview of what we've produced. Again, we've got the introduction and profile already done. It's in that big hard copy stack I was looking at. We'll get that refined and dialed in and shoot that off to you and Renee, so you can take a look at it, and we'll get that out to the committee as well. Then you'll have everything except the last chapter, and the last chapter is just a sort of a framework for going forward. So. Questions, comments? We know it's a lot to absorb and get your arms around. Hopefully you enjoy reading it and you get something out of it. Feel free to comment on anything. If there are Scribner errors and you're a good proofer, flag them. We think we've got a lot of those flagged, but you could have 15 people look at something, and it's the 16th person that would catch something the first 15 missed. So, you know, we have thick skin. If something needs to be fixed or corrected or reworded, we'll do it. So just let us know. So, with
Well
that,
done. Well done.
Yeah.
This is, I would say, kudos. All this information that we've worked through for the last year and a half, no, wait, 2 years and a quarter, almost. And to be here where we are, and there are smiles on people's faces today. You know, there's not consternation, and we know what we can get done and what we can't do. And now we're almost finished.
Yeah, we're close. Close.
And we're speedy. The 2030 plan took 3 years plus. And the 2010 plan took 7 years and didn't get it.
There you go. But this has been enlightening. I think I want to make sure that we get this information out to the county board members so that they can listen to what we're talking about and what we've talked about tonight, so that they aren't blindsided when they get all this information eventually. That we've worked hard on this. I think we've worked very hard. Thank you for coming for the last year, every month, to learn something, to find out something, to do something, and to be this far.
Right.
I'm agog. I know it's an old word, but it's true. I want to go, what? Wow, this is, I'm very happy with this. And I would say it to anybody, and if they have any questions or want to give me have any issues, they can call me at home.
Yep.
What's our schedule, like our next meeting?
You just had it on the, can you go back to the very last one?
The date? Is there a date?
No.
There's not, the next meeting is
March 28th.
March
There you go.
28th.
So it is still
Yes,
28th, okay.
yes. We were going to go over the last 4 chapters, but we don't have to anymore. We'll be going over the whole thing.
You'll be going over the whole thing.
Yeah.
Michelle?
Do you think that the board would be interested in like a briefing sooner rather than later on this?
No.
I remember at Teresa Mesh showed up at something, she was like, I just want to know what's been going on, you know, and so.
Right, oh yeah, and I've invited people for the last year and these couple months. Every time I say, you know, look at it, read it, see it. Carolyn has been very involved. She had to be at someplace else tonight, or I'm sure she would have been here, because we've always been concerned about what everybody needed and what everybody wanted, and how confusing, and this has just opened everything. And Renee?
Also remember that once we get the final draft, once you guys get it where you want it, there's going to be a couple of public open houses that will certainly reach out to the county board and try to get attendance there. And then you guys have to hold a formal public hearing as well on the plan, so.
I wasn't sure if it was like a situation where it might be good to get buy-in early rather than but if we feel that that's not the case, then we're fine.
Ellie,
It's related, but unrelated, but important.
okay.
I'm part of a Kane County Advisory Council too. I'm very busy. And they just came out, you guys may have already seen this, with their conservation and sustainability plan. They don't have a 2050 plan, and it's still open for edits until the 28th or something. I just thought this group would be interested. So if you're interested in seeing their draft, it's only environmental related, but I can send the link to Renee.
Please.
As I said, most people in this room probably already aware of that, given our jobs and stuff, but it'd be good to see kind of what they're doing in that sense. I'll send the link.
Kane County does a nice job. We've known those guys for years. They're a really professional, conscientious group of folks out there. They do a nice job. Kane
Yeah.
County does a good job.
They don't have a comprehensive plan though. I was asking about that. They only have an environmental plan.
Who led up the environment? Was it Mark Van Kerkhoff or who was leading the charge?
I don't remember. I'm on just a smaller.
Karen Miller.
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And they do have a comp plan, but it was, when they did their last comp plan, it was headed up more by the health department.
Yes.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And it's not updated for 2050. Like
Right.
they don't have that in the works, as far as I know. But I'll send the link, just a side note.
So,
Awesome.
and it's not even 8 o'clock.
You're welcome.
Well, everybody,
That's why I was glad.
it was, there didn't need to be that many questions
Right.
because of the way it was written and the way you have explained
Good.
things. So that we've had enough time that we can chit chat and do our things.
Good.
But still, we said everything we needed to say, I hope, and please comment. Renee and I have been talking for the last week and a half saying, any comments? Any comments? Whatever. I thought if you were not happy, there would be more comments. So I'm very happy so
This is
far.
a good group.
Well, thanks for being good stewards for the county. You've been a great group to work with, so we're real close. And we're just about to get this over the finish line, so,
Yes,
all right?
okay, for this evening.
Awesome. Good work, Jen.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Sue John. Thank you, Ally. Good work. Yeah,
Next
definitely.
meeting is March 28th at 6 PM here, and then I'll call for adjournment.
Second?
So moved.
Harry, Charlie, at 7:50. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Right.
I'm gonna wanna